Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna talk about some projects. We're gonna make some updates, things like the Keiki paste experiment, Sphagnum experiment, and other things that I would like to talk to you guys about. We shall do an update because there are things to show and to talk about, and I do want to have an entry, let's say, for these things. I think slowly but surely I'm kind of starting to figure out what orchids I can grow in what type of setups. Wherever I can, I will make my life easier and more affordable, because with this amount of orchids, obviously it is in my benefit to find solutions which are long-term sustainable. Leca and inorganic, I'm always gonna try stuff because it is sustainable in a big collection, but sometimes these materials can have some effects which don't really go together with my environment all that well. So let's start with that. Let's start with the Sphagnum project. As you might already know, I did put some orchids in Sphagnum which simply refuse to get along with Leca. What to do? That is that. Sphagnum at least is very easy on the roots, very fluffy, and when it's time to remove, which sadly it's pretty often, it's not going to traumatize the roots. It's not going to rip the velamen or anything if I'm careful. So I did pot some orchids such as the Oncidium intergenerics, specifically the Odontoglossum side, and just see how they're doing. And well, results are shocking. So what we have in front of us are two orchids which have been potted in Sphagnum about a couple of months ago, or maybe 3 months ago. They're the oldest ones, let's say, in the moss experiment. Next to them we have a Nelly Eiler, which I recently purchased. I cut the flower spike, I potted it in moss, and with this I hope that it will do well, but she's still recovering. She's a new orchid. We're not necessarily going to talk about it, just briefly. Let's just take a look at these two, because as you can see, there's something going on. So both of these, I believe, are Odontoglossum hybrids, or better said, the former Odontoglossum hybrids. I don't actually have a proper ID for the red one, sadly, but shape-wise it does bring me there to the Odontoglossum area. This is a tiger set, which really looks like an Odontoglossum hybrid. Now, I am insisting on this name even though those orchids have been reclassified to Oncidiums, because Odontoglossums don't really grow in the same type of environment such as the proper Oncidiums, like the Sphagnum, for example, which is the basis of the Twinkles and of the Cherry Baby. These guys are cloud forest dwellers, meaning they like things cool and moist. And in my summertime, my environment cannot really stay all that moist, all that cool. So both of these orchids have been struggling in Leca, in self-watering, or in semi-hydro for this one 2 years, this one just 1 year. And I decided, you know what, I think it's time to move to something much more wet. And the result is as follows. First of all, this guy bloomed, so that's nice. You will see a lot of spotting and everything on the leaves. This is because these guys were super dehydrated and deficient at some point. It happens when you don't have roots. But let's just take a look at the root system, see if we do have improvements. And I think it's very clear to see at this point that this orchid is just having the time of her life. Look at that root production. Everything happened in the past 2 months, I'm not exaggerating. She had some older roots. You can see some older roots here at this point. I'm not entirely sure if they're alive. I kept them because they still seemed a little bit rigid, but in full honesty, I'm not sure if they're alive. A little side note, both of these orchids have been treated with Quantum Orchid, but I'm not yet sure if that had an effect. I still need to experiment it. What I am sure about is that Sphagnum moss actually sustained root growth. I don't have any roots just stopping, just burning, just no root tip burn, no nothing of the sorts. So I would say that this is a success, and I cannot wait for all of these flowers to open. Just look at that. Did I tell you that I love red? Let's just focus on the subject though. So with this guy, I think it's very clear to see that the experiment was a success. Let's just look at the tiger set because it's older and more finicky than this one. The tiger set has a long history of just struggling in general. Whenever I unpotted it from Leca, she would start to produce a few roots, then I would put it in Leca, and then again root loss. Anyway, it was a bad 2 years for this orchid, and I think it shows. Well, let's just take a look at the roots now. Mind you, this was in a much worse case than the other one. And there are roots inside the pot, inside the medium, which we don't see, but at least these two we do see. Oh, I see another one here. So happy. And at the top, if we remove the top layer, we can see new root production as well. Now, this setup consists of sphagnum moss, which is loosely packed. Although it might look like there's this mass of sphagnum moss here, it's not. It's very, very loosely packed. If I compress it, I could compact everything in this level. And I'm not exaggerating, I showed you this in a video. On top, I placed a layer of lava rock. I wanted to try it out because I can reuse it, it's inorganic, it's friendly to my pocket, obviously, if I can reuse it. The bad side is it's porous and I'm not sure if it's prone to efflorescence. I need to spend more time with it. Efflorescence happens in time as the salts accumulate. So I don't know if this guy will have salts on top like the leca. That's why I wanted to try it. But inside, things are looking so great. And the orchid herself perked up a lot, even though you see here all of these spots and everything, they're the result of some deficiencies, of dehydration, of stress in general. The new growth has this red tinge to it because I grow this under lights and the LED lights are pretty bright. But that's okay, this is just some anthocyanin. For these two orchids, the experiment has been a success. And since I do have them for a long time, I can definitely say that this is the best they have ever done. Pretty much this is when they're starting to bounce back. Nellie Eiler, there's really nothing to talk about because she's very new. I left some of her older roots and I hope they will branch out. I only left what I thought was alive, but I was kind of optimistic about it. I need all of the roots that I can get with this orchid. Not sure if everything is alive, I hope. So nothing to talk about this orchid just yet. It's potted in the setup for the past 2 weeks, so way too early. But I'm thinking from now on, everything that is finicky, including Miltoniopsis and other things, they're just going to go directly in sphagnum moss and see if that makes any difference. P.S. I spent 2 summers with this orchid and 1 summer with this orchid. They're still here. Therefore, I think I can go the summers with them. I do have a few more orchids, Miltoniopsis and all of that, doing pretty okay in this setup. They're just recently transferred. So I will update you guys on those when they bloom, pretty much. If it will be a success, they will bloom. But for now, I'm just super happy with these ones, which were always a nightmare. Just a nightmare for me to handle. They simply refuse to bounce back. Well, they're okay now. Next up, related to the Sphagnum moss project, is the Cool Growing project. Now, I told you I will talk more about this in the springtime, but at least I'm gonna tell you my idea from now, just so we compare it to my original idea and to what it will become next spring, probably. So, as you might know, I have a Masdevallia orchid for the longest time that I do struggle with. This is really a cool grower. I had it in many types of media, leca, ceramis, semi-hydro, self-watering. It was just not the greatest. I also had it in sphagnum moss and a ceramic pot the last summer in the hopes that I could keep the roots cooler. The thing with the ceramic pots in my environment is that they breathe so much that they dry out incredibly fast. So I need to stay on top of watering and sometimes I really cannot. And whenever this orchid gets way too dry, she's just on a downward spiral. So I decided, okay, I will go with a setup that is very wet, sphagnum moss again. So I decided to use the lechuza pots, which are self-watering pots with sphagnum moss and a top layer of bark at the top. And this orchid has bounced back beautifully. Let me give you a close-up. And there we have her. We have new growth on the way as well. Can you see down there? She is doing so great. Much better than she did in the past year and a half, maybe. So I am hopeful with this setup. What works is, of course, the moisture and the sphagnum moss. The moss is actually a foolproof type of medium for Masdevallias. The problem is it decomposes very fast, but hey, what to do? You cannot have everything. And recently I also acquired an orchid with a very bad reputation. I purchased this as the Dendrobium Cuthbertsoni. Now that I think about it, maybe it's a hybrid. Somebody pointed out in my comment section as well. It's a little too tall to be a Cuthbertsoni. I don't know. What do you guys think? If you have the Cuthbertsoni and you are experienced with that orchid, does this look like a cross? I have been searching the internet, and the best I can come up with is a cross between the Cuthbertsoni and Lowesii or Sulawesi, which makes this orchid a little bit taller than the Cuthbertsoni, but pretty much with the same type of leaves. So even though I'm not sure what it is, I know that this is a cool grower as well, just like the Masdevallia, and it likes to be moist. The typical setup for this orchid is, again, a clay pot with sphagnum moss or even bark. So because I do have issues with the clay pot, I opted for the same type of setup. And again, she has taken to it very, very well. I don't suspect I'll have issues. But then again, it's winter now. What on earth am I going to do in the summertime? Well, I have a few aces up my sleeve. As you might know, I do have a humidifier, which I never used. I just have it there for rainy days, but my environment is already super humid pretty much all of the time. So introducing even more humidity, that might be a little too much even for my grow space. I'm debating on it, but it's an option. Then I told you that I want to do that bench ground floor, put some fake grass, make it look pretty, put new lighting, and the fact that it is lower means that the orchids that I put there will benefit from cooler air. So that's another thing I can do. And the last thing that I am thinking of, and I'm laughing because this started out as a joke, and maybe it still is a joke, but you know what? I'm willing to try it. Well, just add ice orchids. These are cool growers, and they love cold feet. At least this is what the internet says, or the literature. So it's not necessarily about the air around them being cool, but the roots staying cool. And well, putting ice on the roots, not the greatest of ideas, to be fully honest, because it's still ice, it's still super cold, and it still can damage the root system. But what if I can make the reservoir be a lot cooler than the ambiental air? How, you might wonder? Well, having water here with the ambiental temperature plus a little bit of ice, or just introducing cold water, that's all. And being that this is a self-watering pot, the wick will absorb the cool water and pretty much hold the roots cold. Yes, Danny, but are you gonna put ice all the time or cold water all the time in the reservoir? No. In the daytime, I don't have issues. I'm using the AC. In the nighttime, due to economy reasons, I'm not using the AC. It's the night which is the issue. It's the night that is not cool enough. And for many of these orchids, the difference between night and day is really important. So in the nighttime, if I have a few orchids which need a refill of cold water, I'm okay with that. All I want to do is just have a few Masdevallias in my collection. And if this is the way to go, then I think this can be extrapolated in living rooms and other types of setup which are not what you'd call cool. If this works for me in my subtropical climate, then there is a high chance it will work for you in your warm home as well. So that's my idea. It sounds really crazy, but you know what? I'm willing to try it. Why not? In the end, it's cold water. That's all I need. And a reservoir of cold water being wicked up, it sounds pretty logical to me. So that is the plan for these orchids in the spring and summertime, and we'll see how this goes in the future. You might also wonder why I pulled up this orchid in the back. Well, since I talked about the Cuthbertsoni, that it looks to me like a cross with the Sulawesi or Lowesii, which I happen to have, I thought I could show you one of them. These are again cool growers. I have them for about a year. I have this one and another one. And well, it didn't really appreciate some things such as drying out. You can see here the leaf tip die back. Lately, I don't seem to have any more issues. But the thing is, I do want to repot it in moss at some point. I think it will do better. I just pulled it out to show you something very interesting. I do believe that this is a bud here. And also, I do believe this is another bud. Now, I might be wrong. If you guys have this orchid, let me know. This is the first time that it makes these formations, and I don't think they're keikis or anything. I think they are buds because they're very plump. So it is slightly surprising. These orchids, again, have been purchased just for me to experiment with cooler growers and how to better care for them. And I cannot say I did much, but try to keep them wet. I didn't do a great job sometimes, and I do think a change of setup will improve the situation, but there we have it. They spent an entire hot summer here, and they're not what you would call dead. So that's very encouraging for these orchids. This is the cool setup, and with the setup in mind, I do want to try out some cooler things. But since this will be part of a bigger project, probably we're going to talk more about it then. So I think this is about enough with the sphagnum moss and cooler growing orchids. Let's get to the keiki paste situation. Okay, so if you don't know what this is all about, check the description down below. I'll share with you a link in which I test out a product from Repotted called Keiki Grow. It is supposed to be a hormonal paste that you put on the nodes of a flower spike on Phalaenopsis, and the end result hopefully is a keiki. Sometimes you also get flower spikes. And when I did the update on these orchids, I told you that I would have loved to wait another 2 weeks. I think the update was posted 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, because things just need time. But there were a few people in the comment section just so incredibly eager. I was thinking, okay, maybe these people want to buy the product and they're waiting. Okay, I'm not gonna wait with the update anymore. But honestly, you guys, I wish I waited, because now I can actually show you the result, because I know what these things are now. So I will next time do the update when I think I have something pertinent to show you, and I would love it if you could be patient with me as well and not insist that much, because it's not going to be a good update. This, however, is an update. Yes, we have a keiki, finally. So this is the orchid with the growths, which I did not know what they would become. And, oh, I think we're a little dark here. Here is definitely a keiki. You can see this is the first leaf and the second leaf is just sprouting. There are no roots right now, but this keiki is just forming, but definitely this is not a flower spike. We also treated one node upwards, and this one is not going to be a keiki. I believe it will be a flower spike. And on the other side, we treated one of the eyes, which will be a flower spike. What is interesting is that other nodes have woken up as well. And this is because the orchid is actually pushing energy into these spikes. Most probably, if I wouldn't have used the keiki paste, this orchid would just produce new flower spikes. These guys may be a secondary branch. But now that the orchid is actively feeding these two branches, most of the nodes are waking up. I do believe they will be flower spikes, and you know what? Even though we did obtain a keiki here, I will just go ahead and say that I do believe this is not an appropriate time to use keiki paste, at least for me in this environment, because we're experiencing the drop in temperature, and this naturally triggers the flower spikes. So all of my Phalaenopsis, or most of them, are producing new flower spikes. The other one that I treated is producing secondary spikes as well. They're not keikis. And I do believe this experiment is better suited for springtime or even summertime, when these orchids actively grow vegetatively and their hormonal balance is different. But if you are actually looking for multiple flower spikes and creating branches, I guess this is the season to do so. Anyway, both of the orchids that I treated were store-bought. They were not what you would call seasoned, so maybe that influenced it as well. So with that said, I think we can end the experiment for now. I will bring it up again in the springtime when my Phalaenopsis will be already in full bloom or already finishing blooming. Well, in my climate, this will be in summer. Anyway, I will try this again, but not in autumn. I think the time was not okay for keikis, but definitely very okay for secondary spikes. Oh, this one has a bud as well. So yeah, if you want secondary spikes, now's the time to obtain them. Alrighty guys, so this is about it for today. I really wanted to make an entry on these Sphagnum orchids because I'm just so hopeful right now for these Miltoniopsis, Nellie-Eilers, Odontoglossums that never did do great in my setup. And I always thought it's the environment, what to do. You cannot really grow everything you want to. Or can I? So yeah, you know me, I'm always in search for things that improve the life of our orchids or ourselves. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know down below about the Cuthbertsoni situation and the Lowesi thing. Fingers crossed for buds. That would be really amazing. And you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. Also, if you're interested in anything in my setup, I do list all of the products that I use down below. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!